And here is okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Then, if we're happy, everyone, shall we start the meeting? Okay. Welcome and apologies, Paul.
Thanks, Mike. Apologies for the absence today are noted on the agenda. If there are any others, we'll note those in the minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you. And then minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on the 31st of August. Wish to approve? Yeah, thank you very much. Action sheets and matters arising. Paul, anything to bring to our attention?
Well, just a couple of matters first, Mike. Just under declarations of interest, just for the record, just to say that Karen has made a declaration of interest. When we did the extraction from the database, the update hadn't been done. So Karen has declared that she's a director of DD Consultants and also a trustee and senior independent trustee for transforming the Future Multi Academy Trust. So we can just record that, please. Then in terms of the action tracker, a couple of items just to pick up. We have said that we bring forward a patient story relating to stroke, and that's been included on the agenda today. A number of other items have been reviewed by the executive team to see where those are scheduled for. Just one area to draw your attention to is in relation to an accessibility issue that was raised during the patient story at our last Board of Directors meeting. And we've taken action just to do some accessibility work regarding the Board of Directors, functionality of our teams. That review hasn't revealed any significant weaknesses, but we have identified where we can make some improvements in respect of accessibility standards, and we've executed that since the last meeting. Thank you.
Colleagues, we're happy to move on to matters for consideration. Next item is the patient story. We've a number of people in the meetings today that are talking on various sections of the agenda. So I won't go around and ask everybody to introduce themselves. I'll just ask people to introduce themselves when we get to that agenda item. But we've got Barry Rigg, Joanne Maguire, Yvonne Hastings and Megan Fowler here for this next item. Barry, if I turn to you, who's introducing it, please?
So I was going to introduce Barry. So Barry's brought David today to tell his story around his stroke experience, and I'll just go straight over to Barry to do the introductions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. So hello, good morning. My name is Barry Rigg, Head of Patient Experience here at Morecambe Bay. So today we have a patient story from David and David's wife, Pamela. There's a written copy of David's story provided within the reference pack, so within your reference pack from pages 4 to 6. David and Pamela has joined the meeting today via a remote video link, and they are accompanied by Megan, who is our Furnace team leader for integrated stroke and community. Megan is also an occupational therapist. As the chair has also noted, we have a number of clinical colleagues here with us today to help with any questions that may arise following the patient story. So David lives in the Furnace area. I recall David explaining that he has. I'm really sorry, but I've got loads of feedback from somewhere.
We can hear you, Barry.
Okay, thank you. So I'll keep going. Thank you. So David lives in the Furnace area. David had a stroke on his 70th birthday at his 70th birthday party. At the time, David was having a garden party, serving drinks to his guests. David recalls managing to make it to the garden bench and saying, "I think I'm having a stroke." David remembers his head dropping and his right arm and left leg feeling heavy. An ambulance came within 20 minutes and David was taken to Furnace General Hospital, where David remained in hospital for many months. David recalls at the time that visitors were not permitted to visit the hospital, and the rest for David is a bit of a blur. Last week, I met up with David, Pamela and Megan to produce a short clip for today's board. I'd now like to share that clip.
Because I met David when he first came into hospital, so I remember seeing him right from the word go. And as David said, he can't remember any of that time, the first 8 weeks. And that's very much the case. He was asleep practically for that whole time. But we still, as a therapy team, would help support him to sit up. So initially, David didn't have any sitting balance, head control, and wasn't able to communicate with us. Yeah, you okay, David? Yeah. And you've worked so hard, haven't you, with the therapy team, come so far in those 5-6 months in hospital, and then have come further again.
Brilliant.
And you were able to
Yeah.
remember any
No,
important bits to you that you...
bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I don't really study about Harville and things like that. Don't really ever any of that.
No.
I've seen it like a light switch on, and then I could do things again. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing. That nugget of information is really helpful. So when other people listen back to this, they'll be able to think, okay, well that was the same for me, or maybe it was a little different for me. Okay. So with regards to eating now, I think you're really proud at the moment that you sit and eat at the dining room table.
Yeah.
Yes. So is that like?
If it doesn't.
So I was going to ask, is that like a goal that you work towards to?
It's a bit of a goal, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Good. And I was also going to ask about carers, because when you were discharged from hospital, were you discharged with a care package or some support from carers?
Care package. And let's go 3 times a week. For Thursday.
4 times a day, David.
4 times.
It was 2 carers, wasn't it?
2 carers 4 times a day.
Yeah.
And today, are those carers still with you, or
1 carer.
one carer? Once a day. Huh?
Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. So as we just sort of start to summarise and end this conversation, what sort of information or what sort of story would you like to share with maybe the ward staff or the ambulance staff or the A&E staff or Megan's team? What would you like to share? Any reflections and thoughts? Or?
Yeah.
The physio team were wonderful to him. Really caring and shoving him at the same time. Giving him a push when it was needed to get him to do something else. But they did it compassionately and.
Good.
Well, everybody. When I did manage to get in the hospital, the nurses were all very nice, and could see that he was looked after.
Yeah. Yeah. They looked after me very well.
Brilliant. Good. Thank you. So thank you, David. Thank you, Pamela. Megan, would you like possibly just to close the story with a colleague reflection?
So, as we've said, David has come so far. Initially, from being in hospital, when you first came home, David, you were using equipment, weren't you? Was it the Sarah Steady?
Steady.
Yeah. And that was initially when you first came home, wasn't it?
Yes, and he was in the hospital bed.
Yeah, hospital
With a
bed.
little mattress.
Yeah, I get an old bed now.
Yeah, you're back. That was one of your goals, wasn't it? To get back in your own bed. And how are you moving around now, David?
Pretty good, actually.
Yeah,
Most of the time.
Yeah, with your quad stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, walking with his quad stick. So
sometimes I can't manage without it, and the answer is no. At the moment.
Yeah.
I've got to have that stick away.
Yeah.
Or.
Yeah, some days you'll be more tired than others, and it will affect your mobility, won't it? Yeah. But I think, absolutely. From my point of view, obviously being the team leader of the stroke therapy team in Furness, I think if 2 years ago this service wasn't available, this support in the community. So from our point of view, the fact that we now have a dedicated therapy team in the community is huge, because other people who have perhaps been in similar situations to David may not have had this experience. So from my point of view, it's such a positive story to show how important these services are. But it also needs a lot of effort and support from the patients themselves and family members. It's a huge team effort. So yeah, big well done to David.
Brilliant.
And you, Pamela.
Thank you. Thank you, the team. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's our patient story. I'm sure you agree, lots of thoughts, feelings and emotions shared within that story. Megan is with David and Pamela now live from David's home. And David, I'm going to hand over to yourself, Pamela and Megan, just to close the story today. Megan, over to you.
Hi, sorry, we've not prepared anything, so but yeah, I think that was quite a positive. We weren't sure what to expect, I think, from the recording, so I think that was really nice, a really nice reflection of David's story. So thank you very much, Barry, and thank you for listening.
Could I just say that David would not be where he is now if it hadn't been for the support team that came to him regularly and pushed him, as I said before. But he would not, definitely not be where he is now. We go out, it's difficult to get out, but we manage. But if we'd just been left to our own devices, he'd have been housebound.
Thank you for sharing, Pamela, David and Megan. I now hand back over to Lynn Wire.
Thank you very much, and thank you, David and Megan, for sharing that story. Really powerful and a really good example of how teamwork can improve patient experience and patient outcomes and your quality of life as well. So that's really good to see.
While we're here, David and Pamela, and it's live, would you mind if I just asked if colleagues wanted to ask you any questions? Is that okay, Pamela and David?
Yes.
Yes.
Our colleagues, does anybody want to ask anything? Looking round, Aaron?
Thanks, Chair. So hello, David. Hello, Pamela. My name's Aaron Cummings. I'm the Chief Executive here at the Trust. So I just wanted to thank you both for taking the time to share your story with us this morning. It's really important. So as a board responsible for running the services we have, we often have kind of reports and papers or kind of data and numbers that tell us how our services are doing. And for stroke in particular, we've spent a lot of time making some improvements over the last year or so. So it's really, it's a real privilege actually to hear how some of the teams have responded and started to make those improvements. So I'm just really grateful. I know it can be a bit daunting being live on camera with people you don't know. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that, because what that gives us is confidence that the work that we're doing is helping. So it encourages us to do more of it and invest further in it. So yeah, it's a personal thank you from me.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you do carry on with it to help other people like David.
Yeah.
And give them a better quality of life.
It's what it's all about. Thank you both.
David, I'm Mike Thomas. I'm the chair of the Trust. Just a question from me. How are you?
All right, thanks. All right, thank you.
And are you optimistic that you'll continue to get better?
Yes. We get better all the while.
Good luck with it. And you're welcome to come back anytime, yourself and Pamela. If you want to talk to us and let us know how you're getting on, please do so, either through Barry or Megan if you don't want to come personally. But you're always welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues. Okay, we'll close this item now. We'll move on with any other business. Thank you, David and Pamela. Good luck with everything, and hopefully we'll meet again.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Barry.
Bye.
And Megan, please thank the team.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues. Thank you for that. Thanks, Lynn. Okay, we'll move on. Item 114, Chair's Report, monthly you've got it in front of you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just to briefly add, I think it was too late for the paper, but to say there's some specific activity as the NED safety champion, maternity safety champion, particularly enjoying local safety champion meetings, but also some regional events as well. So what we'll make sure is that we catch up with the schedule so that those can be actively reported each month.
We'll minute that as well. Thank you. Okay, you're happy to note Chair's report? Yep. Then we'll move on to the Chief Exec's report. I'll pass the floor over to Aaron. This is item 115.
Many thanks, Chair. So colleagues will be familiar now with my reporting format, talking about kind of any work or interactions I've had at the national, regional or local level. There are quite a number of items on the agenda today that talk to my report in a little more detail, specifically our integrated performance report, the winter plan and urgent care updates, and a number of others which I won't expand on further, otherwise we'll duplicate on the agenda. I'll start, as I generally do as the Chief Exec, with a massive thank you to colleagues working both within the Trust in our acute and community services, but also wider partnership in Morecambe Bay. Another really challenged month in terms of pressure and performance and delivery of the things that are expected of us, particularly in our urgent care services, which Scott will say a bit more about later on the agenda. And just to recognise, again, this month we've had to escalate to our highest level of escalation through Opal 4. Really pleased that over a couple of days, again, through the hard work of our teams and partners, we're able to de-escalate. But that de-escalation doesn't mean that the pressure's gone. It means that the specific risks at that time we've managed to mitigate and deliver again. So it's just a recognition that when we talk on this agenda today about the improvement work, the performance, the elective recovery, the work that we're doing on things like culture improvement, they're in the context of a very, very difficult set of circumstances for our teams operationally. And I'm not sure we always recognise that the efforts that are being put into the work we need to do for improvement are in that context. So I just wanted to thank colleagues for the continued efforts in that space as I set off on my report. I can't let this report go without recognising formally as a board our condolences on the death of Her Majesty the Queen, and again a thank you to colleagues in the Trust for monitoring and acting within the period of mourning as we would expect an organisation of our type to do, and also for helping to ensure services were able to be delivered over the extended mourning period and the bank holiday. That was a difficult period for us and again contributed to some of the pressures that I've just mentioned, but really pleased with the response and the support that we gave each other and the partners were able to provide. Also nationally, we've had quite a significant change, haven't we, with the appointment of the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and also for the NHS and Health and Care, the appointment of a new Secretary of State in Therese Kofi, not Sorella Braverman, as noted in my report. Apologies. He was appointed as Secretary of State for the Home Department, so that's an error in the report that we needed to recognise. From our perspective, what does that mean practically? Well, we're already seeing some guidance, some direction on where the specific focus is expected to be for the NHS. It is aligned to our strategy and our objectives this year around health and wellbeing of colleagues, elective recovery, reducing waiting times, improving access, and urgent care improvement. Particular focus on ambulance service performance and handovers to get crews out as quickly as we can. So really pleased to see that clarity of direction. Equally pleased to see that they're on our agenda as key priorities, so we can continue to align on that delivery for the remainder of this year. More locally, I had updated in previous reports, obviously, the mobilisation of our integrated care board, integrated care system from the 1st of July formally. The appointments we've updated on before at board level in the ICS and ICB. Real clear priorities, again, aligned to that national direction currently for providers, at least, on urgent care improvement, elective recovery and financial performance improvement, which we are working together on daily. And we've now had notification of the place-based directors having been appointed and starting. That's Louise Taylor for Lancashire and Jane Scattergood for West London Furness or South Lake, South Cumbria. We are already making contact with those colleagues, both as a trust and our role within Bay Health and Care Partners, and just working through what it means practically, and we'll update the board as the place-based partnership agenda firms up a little. More locally still in the trust, a couple of bits of update and then a closing comment from me. So we've unfortunately had to postpone our annual members meeting, which was planned for this month, due to the period of mourning and the establishment of the work that we'd have to do to set that up. We will be notifying the public of a revised date later in the year for our annual members meeting, and we are looking at options to improve accessibility for communities to join us in the annual members meeting, which we'll communicate out on in due course. I had updated the board on executive appointments periodically over the last 12 months. Disappointingly, we didn't appoint in the last round of recruitment for our Chief People Officer. So in the interim, we have Bev Edgar, who I've secured for a period of up to 6 months now. Bev's doing a great job working with us and our teams. And it's great to see Lynn deputising here today as the Deputy People and OD Director, supported by Bev. We are out to advert again for the Chief People Officer. Interviews are on the 12th of October and early views of interested candidates are really positive. So I would hope to come with more positive news on that appointment in the October board meeting. Final comment from me, Chair, is a reflection of the work we've been doing around trauma and orthopaedics. So I just want to put on record again publicly our thanks as a board, my personal thanks to Simon Ratcliffe and Sham Kumar, the two consultant surgeons who raised concerns back in 2016-17. One, for their tenacity on recognising that in raising those concerns, we've said before in the reports we've had here, that whilst the trust took action, it wasn't the best action that could have been taken and it took far too long to address the concerns raised. And an apology again to Simon and Sham for the continued kind of period it's taken to work through that and get to a final position. So publicly, again, we would like to recognise that. We have a final report coming for trauma and orthopaedics in the November board, which is an independent external review around the impact on colleagues in raising concerns in the way that was progressed through trauma and orthopaedics, to take any actions that we need to as a result, and to make sure any learning from that report we take into some of the wider improvement work. So the board will see that in November. We're also going to be setting up, in the same way that we did for the urology and niche report with the board and the Council of Governors, a full review, including the authors of the various reports we've had in this space, so we can take a full and final kind of reflection of the actions that we've delivered, anything remaining to be delivered, and any themes that we'd want to progress as part of our continued improvement work. And that would conclude the work that we would do around trauma and orthopaedics. It is connected, as board will be aware, onto our Improving Together, the recovery support programme, particularly under Bridget's leadership on freedom to speak up, whistleblowing and raising concerns. And I'm pleased to see the progress of improvement in that area and the feedback received through things like the People Pulse surveys, starting to show that our colleagues are recognising improvements in that area, but it will form part of the review, check and challenge that the board will oversee before we start talking about soft for exit reviews in the new year. And the board will know, Mike and I have made this commitment a number of times, that work will progress and continue as we push from January to look at how we move from hopefully the soft 3 category to soft 2 and beyond. So this is a programme of work that will continue long term as part of our continuous improvement journey. So that was as much as I was going to say on my report, Chair. Lots more in there, but they're covered off with more detailed agenda items later this morning.
Any questions for the Chief Exec? Any points on his report?
Well, thank you, Chair. It's actually about the relationships and partnerships section and engaging with colleagues. And just to say, I joined the September team talk session and found it was incredibly informative, really positive, particularly the elements that were really encouraging clinical engagement around specific work streams. So that was from Kathy Hay and from Bridget, those invitations. And what I've wondered since is whether there is any possibility of really understanding how those sessions are accessed. I know it's tricky because there's people joining live and then people can join the recording, but I've found myself thinking, how is this reaching different staff groups and different care groups? And would it be useful to understand that pattern of engagement to triangulate with other areas where we're really driving improvement? It would be really good to understand that.
Yeah,
Louise?
that's me. So we send it out through all of the channels that we've got, including via care groups for direct dissemination through all the corporate channels. It's uploaded to interest, so we can track how many people view the video. We can track how many people actually attend the session itself and see where it drops, where it increases, and try and see whether that's maybe an impact on the content that's being shown. We've also got the survey that not just asks about the quality and content, it asks, did you find it informative? Would you come again? And all those kind of questions that give us kind of bit on the pulse kind of intel. So we're due to review it again. I think it's next month, and we're going to go through to the care groups and try and get some direct feedback. We're also about to launch some communication networks, which I mentioned in the team talk, and that is one of the elements we want to pick up directly with the staff in those. Do you go? If not, why? What would you like to see more? What would work for you if that doesn't? So we can keep it kind of an organic product rather than just this is what you have and this is what you're stuck with. So I hope that helps. But it's a new product, so we're kind of a little bit test and trial at the moment.
That does help, but I think it would be really helpful in future to see that, understand that engagement pattern as a point of triangulation. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a proposal, thanks Louise. It's the how and where do we do that so it satisfies particularly the triangulation. So I think we run the People Pulse survey periodically through the year. So I think it would be helpful to take a composite, maybe a colleague engagement report into board that demonstrates kind of all of the various programs we've got and where they're pointing at, just for board assurance, or more specifically, Karen, your point on triangulation. So I'll pick up with Louise how best to do that into the board reporting cycle. Karen,
Thank you.
Okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking round. We've got their hands up on Teams. Okay, colleagues, and we know the Chief Exec's report. We move on to item 116, Head Governor's update. The update presented by our Head Governor, Lorraine Crossley-Close. Lorraine, floor's yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Chair. I'll just say that, you just take the report as it's written. Apart from that, I'd like to add that I think on behalf of the council, again, we reiterate what Aaron has said about the staff and their working conditions, and, probably they're all a little bit afraid of what's going to happen during the winter. I'd just like to say that they've got the support of all the governors because of the job that they've done and that is ongoing. Other than that, it's not really anything any different than what you've written, other than I would like to thank all the retiring governors for their care, the support, the work that they've done over their tenure of governance. And I will welcome the new governors once we get to meet and hope that we can instill in them what the trust is looking for from their governors in support, in friendly critique, and hope that we can move forward and progress into being a good trust. Thank you, Chair. I will take any questions if there is any.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any questions for the Head Governor? No. Then we note the report. Thank you. And we move on now under the category Patients. Item 117, Recovery Support Programme, our intervention plan. And that's over to you, Chris, our Intensive Support Director. So I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Chairman. The board will recall that following the National System Review meeting that was held on the 14th of July, we undertook to further evolve and enhance our recovery support programme and the achievement of the criteria for exiting System Oversight Framework Category 4, that's commonly referred to as SOF 4, during the second half of the year. And in particular, we were looking to take account of the learning from the first half of the year, as well as a clear line of focus on the requirements from this point to achieve our objectives in this regard. So part of this further development of our reporting assurance processes is the evolution of the report into the report you've seen today. So this is more characterised by the evidence of outcomes of the work undertaken. That's the natural flow of the programme of work. and the demonstration of embeddedness and the sustainability of required improvements. So this report is part of that process. It's presented today for assurance, and the board will note that the narrative of the report is focused on risks associated with the achievement of the required outcomes and the mechanism by which we will be able to provide assurance that our systems and processes have embedded the improvement and will be able to sustain them. The key components from this report they are following we've now had formal receipt of the feedback letter from the national team. That's in the papers in front of the board today. The letter is consistent with the update to the board that we've based on our own reflections and informal comment from other stakeholders since. Pace of improvement is the main theme and is consistent with the requirements of our work stream plans and the objectives of the programme. I'd like to highlight as well the progress that's now been made on the safe staffing review. It's the first closeout report we've actually received formally through this process. So that's a significant achievement in the development of the programme of work. The section 3 and 4 of the main report, just want to expand on a couple of things. So in those sections, we're setting out the risks associated with the scale of activity and delivery required over the next 6 months. We're also saying the challenge of demonstrating the embedded and sustainable outcomes through data is a particular point of focus for us. So the potential impact of ongoing extreme service pressures also faced by the trust are likely to increase over the winter. So we're trying to assess the risk to the success of the programme in that context as well. And the approach that we are taking to support the mitigation and the management of these risks, particularly from paragraph 3.4 onwards, does include the refresh that we've carried out to our programme management processes, the support and the resourcing that we're putting into specific work streams, and enhanced and streamlined oversight and assurance arrangements. We've also highlighted the critical role of the effective implementation and consistent operation of the quality governance and accountability framework. So that was implemented from the 1st of September. So we've been running at that for nearly a month now. And the anticipated impact of the newly formed medical leadership structures as critical elements of the plan for the second part of the year. So they're all significant components of the plan of work to get to the exit criteria that we've set out previously. The workstream progress is set out from page 45 onwards against the exit criteria. We have RAG rated those workstream updates and they've been applied either to reflect work still to be done or the complexity and challenge associated with the components of the work stream. The section 4 of the report articulates the challenge associated with the use of statistical techniques for assurance on outcomes and embeddedness. Now, the challenge where actions are scheduled still to be completed in the second half of the year will be the amount of time available to show embeddedness. That's the issue that we're looking at. And what we want to just give the board some assurance of is that in that instance, we're working now to identify other triangulation points, other routes to provide assurance. And the process that we're going to run through, particularly with colleagues from the intensive support team and the regional office, will be to go through that in advance rather than come to the end of the process and find out that the alternative routes to provision of assurance are not going to be sufficient. So we'll be able to brief the board in a live way on that basis. Just one final point to raise is the information set out in paragraph 4.6, which describes the particular challenge of just demonstrating improved outcomes in respect of urgent and emergency care. And this is not due to the programme of work, it's the context that we're operating within, and in particular, the specific challenges of the numbers of patients in our hospital and in our hospital beds predominantly that don't meet the medical criteria to reside. That's continuing to grow and it's offsetting the impact of some of the plans and actions that we have in our programme of work. So, but we will continue, obviously, to drive that. We're looking to find any opportunities to supplement that, and the narrative conversation through the system improvement board around ensuring that the particular challenges are the focus of system level activity continue.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to open it up. Jill?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just talk about stroke again. I mean, really good news that the Section 31's been lifted from finesse, and wasn't it great to triangulate that with a great story about the difference making those improvements has actually meant. But this is about the third board where we haven't been able to demonstrate that kind of improvement at RLI. So I was pleased to read that there's a weekly task and finish group that Scott is leading, and there's an action plan. And I wonder if we can ask for any assurance from Scott that that's actually that task and finish groups having the required actions at a pace that we need them, because this seems to have been taking a long time at RLI to make those required improvements, and we're seeing the same kind of things again and again where we're not meeting them.
Scott?
Thanks, Jill. Yes, so you'll see on page 140 of the IPR, of the pack, sorry, when we do get there for the first reporting cycle through board, then RLI has increased its SNAP score from a D to a C. I'll report when we get to that, that in this quarter, the unvalidated data suggests we've sustained that, and that there are no reds in that SNAP score. So we can see evidence of improvement in that space, but you'd rightly then challenge to say, well, that's great, but what's the trajectory to be, and how do we sustain that? And so the weekly task and finish that I chair, there is demonstrable evidence, particularly in the front end of scanning, thrombolysis, and access to ward, that we have sustained much better improvement there. We've got a piece to do in therapy at RLI, which is the estates and workforce piece, but I do have a increasing level of confidence that will sustain the C and have a line of sight to the B.
Jill?
Thank you. I was trying to find a thumbs up on my system, but I couldn't find it. So Scott, thumbs up. Well done. That's what I want to hear, particularly in those areas.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Scott. Adrian?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chris, for a really clear report. A point that I'd just like to raise is about the nature of the embedded and sustained direction of travel, really, and that seems to be the challenge, particularly in the light of winter pressures. So I recognise that you've just highlighted the issue around stroke. We just had a discussion about that, but the other one obviously is the criteria to reside, and that does feel, and we saw that in the Opal 4 report, and to recognise that there were pressures already in the system before we hit winter. And it's just about our resilience to actually maintain our direction of travel and our commitment to achieving that track record, so that we're able to show that we've got the embedded and sustained activity necessary to hit SOF 4. Are we able to do that just with a narrative? And I'm quoting your words here because I do think this is very important. The narrative which is taking place, that conversation at the system level. Do we actually need to really step that up? It does appear from reading your report that we're going to need more accountability, particularly from local authorities, about the access to residential care home, which is dedicated, and we're actually confident to mitigate the risk that you're highlighting here, that that's in place before we hit the winter.
Who's going to say that?
So I'm going to cover in quite a bit of detail, Chair, not meeting criteria to reside, and that's in the winter plan paper, so happy to do that then or now.
Yeah, thank you.
Just specifically on the point, because I've raised this around challenge around the period of time that we've got to demonstrate through statistical methods that there's an embeddedness, but also there are other routes that we're looking at as well. So it's not just about less tangible evidence. So remember, what we're very clear that we need to focus on is make sure that the actions have been taken, but also they've had the impact. One of the impacts is, of course, be the reduction, would be offset by the pressures that the competing pressures we're seeing and not meet criteria to reside. So we've got a lot of independent support as well into this aspect of the programme. So we'll be looking at all potential sources of evidence that the programme has delivered its piece, but we have to just acknowledge that there's another context which makes the identification of impact more complicated. It's not necessarily the case that we won't be able to evidence it. It's just that some of the required improvements have other pressures competing with.
Just follow up, Aaron, the net of course will triangulate all this anyway. So as you come forward, as you say, with the data set, we'll look for evidence that can triangulate that to look for signs of embeddedness as well. That's probably be our responsibilities. Aaron.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, like I said, Scott's going to kind of extend a little bit more the specific area of risk, but I just think the reflections that we've got at this point, it's a natural period in the year, isn't it? That's like 6 months after the summer. What do the next 6 months look like? I think with Chris's leadership and Caroline's input, this kind of just check and challenge on the actions look okay, but the evidence, we just need to have real clarity on what the exam kind of scheme might look like when we get there with a bit more granularity. So I think the structure that's been set up with Region and HSEI is the right one, so we can co-design what that looks like. That will then obviously inform the board assurance, so we can start to bring that through the reporting structures in the way that the chairs just articulated. The one point I will make though is the reliance or the partnership kind of contribution we're looking for from Bay Health and Care Partners, from the Provider Collaborative Board, from our newly formed ICS. So lots of those structures and people are new and forming. So the other piece of work we're doing is keeping really connected to those new structures on their contributory actions to our not only action delivery, but the sustainable nature of them. So we'll start to see a bit more, I think, on that level of assurance of partner contribution into the board. And Chris and I had a conversation with Kevin McGee, who's the lead executive of the Provider Collaborative Board 2 weeks ago, just to strengthen that connection with the Provider Collaborative. So we'll see a kind of a feedback loop that attaches us more to some of that partner contribution as well, which we'll also see in future board reports, which might answer some of the questions you were posing.
And if I may, Chair, I mean, it's that confidence and that accountability that we're looking for. And fundamentally, just reading your report, Chris, I can see that there are, there are certainly challenges that you are flagging up, and I recognise the reports coming on winter pressures, but I still feel that's a risk, a real risk, and obviously that's critical to us exiting sub 4, as we all know. Thank you.
You.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of comments. I mean, I think a really good example of the problem we have about showing embeddedness of improvements is around mortality, because we looked at the mortality, had a quarterly mortality report at Quality Committee on Monday. We also had a detailed report on fractured neck and femur work, because that's the one area that we stand out on and will be looked at regarding this. And obviously, you just look at the two main mortality measures of the I'll call it HME and the HSMR. I won't explain what they are, but those both are a rolling 12-month picture. So although we saw perhaps very green shoot, very, very small shoots, that there might be a change around the fractured neck of femur, that really relates to 12 months to June. I think it was to June, if I've got it correctly. And so the next time we get a report in will be the 12 months to September, end of September. And so it's doing September to September. So the things that have taken place in the last sort of 6 months are still going to track through very slowly. Now, I was really encouraged because we saw that a dashboard is being developed around fractured neck of femur that is very similar to the stroke dashboard. And it identifies the sort of 5 or 6 areas that, if we get all those right, all the research shows and previous experience shows that will have an impact on the 12-month rolling figure, but we'll get that evidence through much more quickly. And I think the challenge is going to be if you can get that dashboard up and running in time to show that that's improving in a way that then we can logically expect the 12-month figure to improve. So I think that just shows the sort of work that has to go on in terms of showing proxy measures that research shows well, we're having another report in November on that. So we are keeping a very close eye on the fractured neck of femur work, because I think that's crucial in the mortality area. The stroke, just to pick up, Jill, on the stroke work, we've asked for a more detailed report next month on what's going on at the RLI, so that we can actually have at least the reassurance, if not at that time, the absolute assurance that things are going in the right direction. But picking up on what Scott said, to look at that, to dig down into that in more detail, and then we're going to pick up, I think, the not fit for medically fit for discharge, which is what I still prefer, rather than the double negatives of not meeting the criteria through side. But for that group of people who are in hospital, who are medically well enough to go elsewhere, that impacts on so many other things, and it's not just a number, is it? It's people who are in hospital, who are decompensating in terms of their physical well-being, their mental well-being. We'll be looking at falls, we'll be looking at pressure ulcers. That group of individuals are far more likely, if they stay in hospital, to develop pressure problems, skin problems, to develop, to fall, then to fracture the next femur even. You just think that the whole, these are people that just, it's very, very complex and dangerous when we look at the data here today. We look at all the figures and the trajectories and everything, but actually they're individuals who are actually in this situation that have so many risks associated with them, and then actually feeds into all of this that we're looking at here today. And I think that whole area is just crucial to us. And also notice, because we've picked it up here, we'll pick it up later, the Cumbria Council saying we're concerned that any initiatives that set up will take people from one area and put them in another, and we actually won't be any better off. So I think the complexity of what we're facing on top, as you've rightly said, Aaron and you, Chair, have said about the pressure that the whole team is under at the moment. I don't think we can't underestimate the challenges that the next few months are going to present for us, not only for us, but for our population and the people who are currently in hospital. I think, it's just my reflection. I just say it now rather than saying it at other points during that, because I think it's an important context for the whole of our meeting today.
Yeah, I think good point, Hugh.
Just in relation to what Hugh's said, Chair. So we are going to try and do a piece of work to try and get all of that data for the not meeting criteria to reside and the level of harm that those patients are coming to. We did try in a very quick time period about a month ago, but the data needs a bit of refinement. But Caroline's team has offered us some support to develop a set of metrics to do that.
I should say, Chair, that we actually asked on Monday that we looked at the quality impact of that problem in Quality Committee in more detail. I think, if I remember correctly, I'm with you, Carolyn, and I think we were thinking it was potentially November that we would get a much more detailed look at what the impact on that was for individuals, in terms of not just the time and performance, but in terms of quality.
We'll come back to the criteria to reside when we get to Scott's, because it is a major issue, like you say, Hugh. It's having an impact not only on real people, but everything, our urgent care provision, our finances. It is a huge issue that we really have to address. But we'll come to that when we get to it. I'm going to go Liz, then Lorraine, then Karen. Liz.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks to everyone involved bringing all that report together, because there was a whole multitude of work and teams that sit behind that. It really, really came to life for me that the effects of the RSP progress and programme of work, hearing David's story, because the comments that from the team supporting him at home that 2 years ago this wasn't in place, and that's it was a living testament, wasn't it, to the work of this programme, and that if we hadn't used that, David wouldn't, and his wife wouldn't have the quality of life. Admittedly, it's still improving, it's got a long way to go, but they wouldn't be where they are now. And I think that's the critical thing that we need to take away. We can treat people and we can get them out of hospital, but have we improved their quality of life? And it's that, keeping that moving, isn't it, patients?
Lorraine?
Thanks, Chair. Speaking from a work point of experience, people who stay in hospital longer become less likely to be discharged to their homes, mainly because of that awful word from probably Florence Nightingale's days of institutionalisation. If you're an elderly patient who lives on your own and you're in a ward with other people, that's company every day. You're fed 3 times, 4 times a day. There's a drink there without you getting up. And as much as I am assured and really respect the community teams for what they did, especially like in David's case, I think we really long term have to look at what provision can be made for these patients that are long stay in hospital for no medical reason. I know it's difficult, but perhaps we should be looking forward to having rehabilitation wards that are nurse led, that for patients who don't need medical care, but nursing care that is there that can actually put forward a programme for rehabilitation for home and not rehabilitation in hospital. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Karen?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to go back to a point in Chris's really helpful paper about leadership. So absolutely can see, you've quite rightly flagged the importance of the senior clinical medical leadership, particularly given the pace and breadth of this improvement programme. But then when I think about really embedding and sustaining those improvements, which again are really strongly flagged, I start to think about the wider workforce and middle leadership. And I'm really wondering what assurance we have about the kind of proactive work with the wider workforce, because they will be critical in sustaining and embedding the progress that we make. And do we have sufficient assurance on that, or is that something that we need to address specifically?
Chris?
A couple of things. Actually, so this aspect of the RSP is a really challenging one for data and evidence of embeddedness and so forth. But we do have an entire work stream looking at the people aspect of this, the culture and OD element of the work stream. So, and genuinely, the update that I'll be expecting to review at the programme board next week shows that that's really moved forward in the last month. Also, there's been quite a lot of long-term investment, particularly in the leadership development programme and in the performance and accountability meetings that we have each month. We're monitoring and getting feedback from the care groups about engagement and the value of that process. So that's one thing we could say. We've also, Scott has led a conversation very recently to check in with care groups about capacity, because we're very aware of the competing gaps and the significant challenges and pressures, and we keep that as a live process. We also do review support arrangements and stuff and particular challenges through performance accountability review conversations as well. So there's a whole series of things that we've done to check in on that. We are also just making sure through the programme that we are working proactively with teams to identify any gaps where the programme can provide that support. We do have some resourcing available for that as well. So there's quite a lot going on in that aspect. I specifically said about medical leadership just because that's a newly embedded structure and is critical, of course, to the next stage of development. But Lynn, I don't know, do you want to add anything on the stream?
So, as Chris has said, there is the leadership, the management leadership programme, which is running at the moment and is on target for approximately 1,500 of our colleagues to be through there. But there's an additional programme, so then there's some more bespoke being developed. One of them is around medical clinical leadership. And we're looking at ways, given the pressures, and we know the difficulty of people being released, how we take that to the teams rather than the teams coming to us. I think there is a lot of work that and progress through the people committee and reports coming through there about certainly the feedback we're getting from that, but it is how we evaluate that going forward and how we then see the changes. In addition to that, our recruitment now is all values based, so the people joining our organisation as well, they are appointed around their values.
It's a really good question, because I'm left with another question, which is, and how do you know? So there's lots of things around recruitment, about the metrics we use, about the leadership development program, the numbers that have been through, but they're designed to answer specific questions around capability and capacity. And those questions are posed around performance improvement and delivery. So the acid test will be the reports that we bring to board around assurance on the progression of the continuous improvement program, which, as much as I've thank executive colleagues for their sponsorship and leadership, they are not delivered and led around this table. They are delivered and led by our teams of 9,000 plus colleagues across the organisation. So one of the ways of triangulating that is to connect the areas that are developing the leadership programmes with the connected. So in that space then, how much better are the services doing? What's the patient feedback like? And the only way to do that, because we won't be able to do that through board reports all the time, is to encourage board colleagues to get out and have a chat. So all of us have buddying arrangements with care groups. We all have particular roles within the service. I'd really like to encourage as many colleagues as possible to get out on the wards and departments, have a chat with the service managers and the ward managers. That's the strongest triangulation you'll hear about things that are moving.
Just for our non-exec directors, I know Paul, as company secretary, is currently working to put together a programme of visits for us as well. I've got Lorraine, then Ben. Lorraine?
There was just sort of one thing that because we've now got integrated care boards and systems going through, is it not also a time that trusts or the trust can actually put forward an idea of enhancing the step up, step down beds within our communities? Because so many people who do end up in hospital may not need that if they have that facility within their areas. And I strongly believe that, that a 6-week period initially of actually being semi-cared for, but being encouraged to go back to your own normal home and living is something that we really should be looking at for the future, and not thinking, no, well, we've got to accept that we're always going to have patients who are in hospital who need not be there. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Aaron to come in, Lorraine, because I'll ask Scott to answer it in the later agenda items, so we can have a substantial talk about the criteria.
Yeah, it's just to recognise, Lorraine, that the work that Scott's leading with partners, all of these things feature as part of a medium to long-term solution to make those areas more resilient, to look at service offers that might not be available now. So just to give you the assurance that those suggestions or areas of kind of consideration you've got are being picked up as part of the longer-term improvement work.
Could it be sort of passed on to the governors then that this is work that is ongoing? Because I'm sure we all have the same fear of this becoming the norm of X number of patients on corridors being cared for.
I'm sure we can find a way of bringing the governors, Lorraine, yes.
Thank you.
Take that as an action point, Lorraine. Thank you. Ben?
Hi everyone. For anyone on the call that doesn't know me, I'm Ben Maiden. I'm the chair of staff side at the Trust. Just want to raise a couple of points. One, just in regards to Lorraine's point earlier, saying, why don't we have rehabilitation wards for patients who don't meet the criteria to reside? We actually did have that in the Langdale units that the Trust, unfortunately had to close. But the reason that I'm coming in is around the conversation around engagement with regards to the RSP. So I want to bring to the board's attention some concerns that we have from a staff side point of view. So as part of the recovery support programme work, we've been told by our NHSEI regulator that there are certain policies that the Trust needs to review and adapt to just a learning culture approach to in order for the other work streams to succeed. Now, given that we have been in RSP for, you know, over a year now, I am concerned that as a staff side, we've been asked to try and arrange extraordinary policy groups when we already struggle with the release of reps to get through a series of policies. The policies that have been asked to get through reviewed, changed and implemented are our grievance policy, recruitment policy, disciplinary policy, attendance management, also known as the sickness policy, freedom to speak up, bullying and harassment. As you can imagine, they're some of our most contentious policies that we need to get right, as well as combining policies from Blackpool and Cumbria trusts that staff have tupied over with. So imagine my surprise when the RSP board is asking me that to get these policies done within the next month or two, when we've been in RSP all this time. And quite frankly, you know, we asked the NHSEI regulator what work has the trust been doing in the meantime, you know, in the last 12 months to prepare for this. And the answer was, I don't know, but this is where we're at. And, you know, we're looking to get for out of soft 4 by March. But there's been an extraordinary amount of pressure on staff side colleagues to try and rush this work through now. I'm worried about how meaningful it will be. I was very concerned that at the last policy group, there was a narrative being alluded to that staff side were going to be essentially blamed for if this didn't go right. So I think it's only fair that if we're discussing engagement, that the board gets a true reflection of what's happening with regards to the culture and OD side of the RSP work stream, especially around policies and just in learning culture.
Thanks for those points, Ben. I'm going to ask Lynn, then Chris to come in. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I would like to start then by thanking our union staff side, our staff side colleagues for the work that they do with us with regard to policies. We are aware that there are a number that we want to review with regards to restorative and the cultural changes. We do need to prioritise some of them. If it is with regard, and please let me put on record, this is not about blame at all. And I wouldn't want anybody to feel that they're being blamed, because it isn't. And we want to do and do our policies in partnership. They have to be fit for the future. We have policies currently that we feel some of the terminology and some of the processes probably are not as just and restorative in approach as we would want. And I also take point around us having 3 policies in the main for us to look at bringing them into one. We do need to look at the timelines. If we can help with regard to release, we certainly would do that. But we will work and hopefully achieve a number of more supportive policies and processes as we move through. I think one thing we need to do then is look at how we prioritise some of these to move through. And, you know, going into what we know will be a difficult winter, we absolutely need to have the right support for our colleagues with regard to health and well-being, if they raise grievances. And, you know, I would hope with a different approach through just and restorative, that the disciplinary policy and MHPS, which is another one that we have to look at, will be perhaps the formal processes we will not use as much. I am aware that we have a paper going to People Committee next week, and I wonder, Adrian, whether we can pick up in more detail how we collectively with our staff side colleague union staff side work through the priority order for these, and how we also support USS to work have the facility time to be able to look at these. I don't know, Ben, whether that would be if we could look at it in more detail.
I can just interrupt us, Chair. Ben, I'm not going to ask you to respond to that. I think that's a conversation that you and Lynn should have outside of the board with Adrian as chair of the People's Committee, because I'm conscious of time and I'm conscious we've got to get through the agenda, but you have raised a very important issue. So I'd like that conversation to continue, but we don't have to have that arrangement meeting here. That can be done outside. Chris, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just think, I mean, the RSP programme board meets next week, so although I wasn't at the last programme board, I don't think this is a pressure coming from the programme board. Certainly in the meeting next week, I'll be looking to understand what the issues are, what the risks are, and what our potential solutions are. I'd expect that to be a jointly agreed owned solution, and certainly there's nothing in our reporting that attributes blame for any of this sort of thing. It's all about how do we practically work through the issue. And so I certainly wouldn't be looking to apportion blame in this context, absolutely not.
I think the other point is that we are trying to get the trust to get to SOF 2. The mechanics of sorting out SOF 4 is just repairing things so that we can get to SOF 2. We don't want to slip, to make an important point, Ben, we're not going to slip into the habits of trying to rush things through so we can tick boxes around SOF 4. Because as you started your talk, Chris, it's about embeddedness, and we need that really. We recognise culture change will take time. Ben, are you happy with the discussion and the fact that the People Committee will continue to talk about the details and the support for staff and the release of staff? Is there anything you want to come back on?
There is stuff I'd like to come back on. I appreciate the support for release, which has already been there, but this is not a matter around release. This is, so for context, the policy group does function well when we work in partnership, and we've been working on our grievance and resolution policy alone now for the last 3 months of policy groups. So 3 months on one policy and it's still not quite where it needs to be, and the trust is asking us to get 6 of the most contentious policies done within 1 month. The trust is being unrealistic with its time frame and has wasted 12 months. We had, we talked about priority planning and stuff a couple of months ago now. We met with the work stream lead for this to plan out a policy group calendar, and none of this discussion happened around the policies needed for the RSP. So whilst I agree that this isn't about proportioning blame, I do have to alert the board that I think the board, that the trust has been inappropriate and unrealistic with its timeframes and is putting us in a very pressured situation now where it feels like getting these policies through is going to be a key part of getting us out of SOF 4, and a lot of the pressure to do that is going to be on release of staff side, and how much release is going to be needed to get all these policies done when one policy alone has taken 3 months. I'm concerned for my staff side colleagues.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. I'm going to let last point on this item from Aaron, then I'm going to move on.
And it's a really important point, so thank you for raising that, and it's an apology from me. So for whatever reason we've landed clumsily in a time period that looks like it's really difficult and challenging for people to respond to. So we'll work as best we can to try and get the resources and the approach right, so these policies as they're developed, they make sense for colleagues and they lead to the improvement that they really want to see. So it's not about achieving something by a date. The policies are there to support colleagues, so we need to make sure that that's done. I'll ask Chris under the RSP leadership and Lynn to make sure that there's a balanced view of what can reasonably be done under what time properly, and then we can reconsider what that looks like for wider timescales. So yeah, really important point. I know this would be a dialogue at the RSP board next week in the People Committee, which some of the detail can be worked through, but yeah, we'll make sure, Ben, that we do this in the right way over the right time so the policies are of good quality when they land. And if that means pressure on timescales, we'll need to think how better we do that. So apologies if staff side have been asked to or perceived to be asked to do something in a few weeks that quite honestly can't be done. We'll do that in the right way with you in partnership.
Okay, so we've got those action points from the board. Colleagues, happy with that? Yeah, okay, let's move on then. Item 118, the Care Quality Commission, Royal College of Surgeons Improvement Plans, Director of Governance.
Thank you, Chair. So for those of you who are using the pack, we're on page 59. I wanted to start just with a little bit of due diligence, if you like. So first of all, to say that this paper was shared with Quality Assurance Committee on the 26th of September, before it comes here. And the second bit is to note the change in practice from what we've been doing previously, which was to have a combined CQC Royal College and niche report. That's now divided into two. I'll come on to item 118 part 2 shortly, talk a bit more about niche. Within the report, just a couple of things I wanted to note before I took questions. On page 70, there's some key points laid out for the board. The fourth one down, I just want to clarify that we are absolutely not going to hoover up a non-executive director into the operational soup of the organisation. They are there voluntarily, if you like, to see that those processes are running appropriately rather than to join in with those processes. So just to assure you about that. Slightly different role for Simon Bradley, in so much as he can contribute in a slightly different way, coming from the Integrated Care Board. And obviously they've been invited rather than invented. On Appendix 1, which is in this paper, I just wanted to recognise, celebrate the progress that we've made with our complaints management. That's an improving picture. I would say, though, that that's been derived out of discretionary effort rather than process. So we are in the middle of hosting a complaints process mapping exercise to make sure that extra improvement is derived on better processes rather than harder effort. But nonetheless, it's nice to see that improvement there. My final point I wanted to make before coming to board questions was in your reference pack on page 47 of 309, we talk about our new governance structure. And it's labelled as partially compliant at the moment. I'm using that as an example because I wanted to demonstrate by using an example of what would take it from partially compliant to fully compliant. So, as you know, last month, the Board of Directors very kindly signed off the new governance framework. So we designed it, we built it, we PDSA'd it. We've even got the comms materials lined up to advertise, promote and market that new governance structure. We've had the paper to board, to quality assurance. We need the minutes that were approved from today's board to act as evidence that we've done what we said we were going to do. And then the testing of the robustness is then 3 months worth of minutes scattered across that new governance structure to demonstrate that we're actually living and breathing it. Then it's green, not green before we've gathered all of that. So as an example of our enthusiasm for making sure that we're absolutely confident that we're building sustainable models in our governance structure. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Richard. Colleagues?
Thank you, and thank you, Richard. It's really helpful to see things laid out in tables like this, and there's clearly a balance between all of those actions that are fully completed and approved and those that still are subject to ongoing work, and it's really good to see that clearly. I guess my question is, how assured are we that we've got the balance right and we can keep the balance right between the focus on completing those actions that are still outstanding and then the focus, the twin focus on ensuring that those that have been completed remain embedded? How are we assured that we've got the balance of that activity right?
I wouldn't. I'm confident rather than I'm assured. I can't demonstrate it to you through the availability of evidence yet, because the governance structure hasn't been through a sort of 3-month cycle for me to show you, look, here's how we're tracking stuff. So am I confident we have the right structure coming into play? Yes, absolutely. Do I think people will engage in it, which is critical in terms of people appreciating that clinical governance is everyone's responsibility? Do I think we've built a structure that does that? Do I think there's less duplication? Yes. But will it take me 3 months to be able to show that to you? Yes.
Okay, so come back to that question in the new year.
Each month.
Okay. Happy to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Clearly, the way that these trust action plans tend to be laid out, we have a bunch that come up, say, in October, and a bunch that are coming up in March, and they tend to get all bunched together, don't they, as people, when they look forward, they think, oh, that everybody chooses a certain date, and obviously end of year and end of September or October obviously tends to be a key one. I noticed that behind schedule, we have, I think the September position is 43, completion in October. It's a better position than last month. And I just think I would just like to understand from your perspective how confident, it probably is confidence again, how confident you are that that come the end of October we won't have, I would say, 40, which is only now, we're talking about a month away. So obviously work's gone on since this has been produced. So we're talking about probably 7 or 8 weeks after this was produced. How confident are you that figure will be significantly down, because we're about to hit a period where it's going to be really challenging?
Yeah, I'm very confident of that. And in fairness, you'll recall in both August and July, we were quite transparent and reported that we had some lag issues in terms of achieving recommendations, particularly with the medicine division. We put some extra support into the medicine division. We doubled up on the number of support and review meetings that we're having with them. That there is palpable grip within the care group. And there's no lack of motivation around doing that before we get into the depths of winter as well. So I'm confident that that 43 will not read 43 by the time I'm here next month. Thank you.
I'm going to go Jill, then Liz. Jill?
Richard just answered my question, which was about the risk in the medicine care group, because this is the second month we've seen concern about that, and they are the people at the front line of the emergency pressures as well. So Richard will continue to monitor that at the next month's meeting, and we'd like to see some real evidence of catch up, because that's 60% of the must do recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Liz?
Thanks, Richard. So my question is around there's a number of areas that sit on page 48 of the report that the trust may, along the lines of the trust must continue to make improvements in the culture of the organisation, and that there's a number of subsections on that. And it's just really, how do we get because it's very sort of a touchy-feely kind of, you get more of a feeling of that the culture's improving and that people feel more supported, and they feel that they can rely on the systems to escalate and that action will be taken, rather than run off to the CQC or whatever processes that they may feel they want to do outside the organisation. How are we going to demonstrate that that there's change? We might feel it's changed, and people may tell us they feel more supported, but how do you actually put some rigour into?
It's not a topic that you could SBC chart your way through to statistically demonstrate. Yeah. I get that. There are some methods that we do use. So our we have a very productive relationship with the Care Quality Commission. When they're flagging a concern that's been raised by a member of staff to them and then back to us in order to formulate the answer, that's a quite brutal metric to demonstrate that if that's going down, in other words, the number of queries that are going from staff to Care Quality Commission without any pit stopping inside the organisation, then you would use that as an indicator of the improvement in the processes around not just freedom to speak up, but all the stuff that needs to happen before that, including raising concerns, which we've heard about a little bit earlier. So I'm very confident, and there's a paper later that talks about the work that's being done by Dan West to improve our raising concerns arrangements, that by Christmas we'll have something that's accessible and available for staff to show how and signpost where they can raise concerns with.
Just to add to what Richard just said, there are some definitive markers that I would ask the board to consider as we present evidence over the next 6 months. So the outcome and the results from our People Pulse surveys and the staff survey, which we'll bring up through boards over this next 6 months. The levels of incident reporting and how incidents are being reported would come through the quality committee, SIRI panels, etc. The friends and family test and the feedback that we get from our patients about how it feels to be treated in our organisation. The recruitment and retention figures that we have that indicate whether you've got a positive culture in terms of retaining colleagues or exit interviews. So there's probably a dozen markers that would indicate cultural shift or change that we're trying to focus on. And ultimately, it's the new values that we've kind of developed with our colleagues that are the marker. So that kindness and compassion, openness and transparency, ambition, innovation. They're the things that should start to see the bellwether markers for culture changing. So whilst you can't produce a single report or an SPC, I think particularly for non-executives, that triangulation of where would you expect to see the things that we're trying to move. So it's not just culture, there are some specific things that we've said need to improve on the improving together, moving forward feedback. That's where I would focus attention to things like the IPR or the periodic reports to look for that triangulation.
Okay, colleagues. Have we noted the recommendations, the noting and the issues as well around the escalation in the medicine group? Okay, thank you. I know we're due for a break at 10:55. We've got another 25 minutes of agenda items here. Item 118 and 119, both are important items. So as it's coming to 10:55 now, I recommend we have a 15-minute break now and come straight back to niche and maternity update. Okay, we'll see you back here at 10 past.